Hello. I'm back. I had some crackers and cheese. That's what I had for lunch. I had crackers and cheese. Yeah. Yep. And we should be starting shortly. Very shortly. And this is not Russian disinformation, but I guess maybe it is really if you think about it. You were listening to Bach? That's beautiful, Ursi. I love that. Yeah, Nina Burleigh. Yeah. I love Bach. I like a little Bach in my day. Yeah, I like a little Bach in my day. Yeah. Wah, wah, wah. I guess this isn't really a wake and bake anymore, but I'm not going to change it. And there is little Gustafer. Yeah, that's a lot of your hair, isn't it? That's basically all your hair. Oh, he's going to clean his ass for you. Congratulations. That's right. On the Met site, played in the cloisters. Oh, how fun! Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, it's all right. I'm fine. Thank you, Carrie. I'm fine. Thank you. Hi, Basket Package, winner of the funniest meme for 2024. Is that Marilyn Monroe? No, even better. Oh, no diggity. You always make me feel pretty. Thank you. It's nice to have people make you feel pretty. It doesn't even matter if it's true or not. I'll take it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's Lolo. Yeah. It's the sound of the police. That's what I was singing just a minute ago. Whoop, whoop. Oh, thanks, No. That's really nice of you. You've always been a good bud. A good bud. On the YouTubes. Yeah, so this should start soon, and then it's Dangers of Project 2025. 2025. 2025. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Aw, thanks, Earthsea. Diana, I should say. You make YouTube better. Aw, love you. Gosh, no, you've been a real good pal. So thanks for that. Sometimes it's a little rough on these streets. You know what I'm saying? Just a bit rough. And I'm a baby too. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit I'm a bit of a baby. No, that's fine. Sometimes I'm able to get my tough skin, but that's the sound of the police. Whoop whoop. It's the sound of the whoop, whoop.
Recording in progress.
Of extreme right-wing Christian nationalism into Trump's Project 2025.
What the fuck?
And
are you kidding me right now?
We're going to talk about the ways in which this Project 2025 policy mandate for leadership, which I have a copy of here. It's very heavy. It's very Bible-like. How that will be implemented and what we can do about it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. They're both from Americans United for Separation of Church and State. First, we have Rachel Lazar, who became president and CEO of the organization in February 2018, right in the middle of Trump's administration. She's the organization's first non-Christian and female leader in its 76-year history. Rachel is a lawyer, advocate, and strategist who has dedicated her career to making our country more inclusive. In her position at Americans United, Rachel oversees the organization's work to protect freedom of conscience for all and ensure religion is not used to justify discrimination. She's a graduate of Harvard University and the University of Chicago Law School, and a former board member of NARAL Pro-Choice America. And we have Andrew Seidel, also an attorney, constitutional and civil rights attorney, and the author of 2 books, The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is
Shooby-doo, how you
Un-American,
doing?
An American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom, which he will discuss today. He's also co-editor of an academic text, Law and Religion, Cases and Materials, 5th edition, with Professor Leslie Griffin of UNLV Law School. He's been fighting to keep state and church separate for more than a decade. Welcome to you both, and welcome listeners and participants. We're going to talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to give you a chance to jump in and ask us questions. A little bit about me, I am a contributing editor at the New Republic, and recently published an article in the New Republic about Project 2025 and what experts in various areas of its the policy areas that are affected by this plan say are the most dangerous aspects of it. And I have recently published an article in New York Magazine about Opus Dei, right-wing Catholic power cabal in Washington,
We just
involved
read
with
that.
the Supreme Court and other aspects of the United States government. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about Project 2025. Rachel, let's start with you. We've talked about religion, religious freedom, Christian nationalism, the dangers in Project 2025. Can you just give us an overview of what's in there?
Absolutely. And Nina, it's an honor to be here with you. I have such respect for your journalism and with the New Republic and all of the listeners who've taken time today. I also wanted to clarify that Americans United for Separation of Church and State is nonpartisan. We abide by the Johnson Amendment. We're a 501c3, which means that we don't take positions on candidates or electeds, but we do take positions on issues. And we are the only secular nonprofit dedicated 24/7 to protecting church-state separation, which is the cornerstone of religious freedom. So today we are talking about Project 2025, a product of the Heritage Foundation, which is a 920-page playbook in how to turn our democracy into a form of theocracy. And I want to illustrate how it's doing that in 3 ways. First, it would attack reproductive freedom. And reproductive freedom bans, like abortion bans, violate religious freedom because they prevent us from making our own decisions about our own bodies according to our own moral and religious beliefs. And so under Project 2025, it would ban the most common form of abortion, which is medical abortion. It would ramp up abortion surveillance throughout the states in a big brother sort of way. And it would also limit contraception. That's point 1. Point 2, and this is just illustrations, Nina. This is just a few of many examples. It would institute a biblically based view of the family, which is, of course, Project 2025's biblically based view, because there's a lot of biblically based views of, for example, LGBTQ people and families. I'm a Reformed Jew, and in my own religion, we have a very different view than in ultra-conservative Christianity. It would allow for attacks on LGBTQ people in the realm of education, healthcare, in the realm of the provision of social services, and in employment. Example number 3 is the attacks on public education. Here, I think the white Christian nationalist part of white Christian nationalism really comes through, because it would eliminate the Department of Education, which one of the authors of Project 2025, Russ Vogt, has called the Department of Critical Race Theory, right? I think revealing what the true goal is. And it would divert public dollars away from public schools where the majority of our children go, 90% of our children, 94% of Black children, and give those dollars to private religious schools that indoctrinate and can discriminate. And I'll just say, I'll conclude here by reminding people with us today that the roots of the private school voucher movement are in evading Brown versus Board of Education desegregation orders and finding a way to fund white Christian segregation academies, and that private education is still very segregated in this country. So those are just a few examples of many, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more, but these are ones that Americans United is tracking closely. And this, by the way, Nina, my last point will be, this is just what's explicitly mentioned, and just a few examples of what's been explicitly mentioned in the agenda. There's so much more that the shadow network, the $1 billion shadow network behind Project 2025 has in mind.
Thank you for mentioning the $1 billion network behind it, because that's a very important part of what's happened here. The alliance between the religious right and the billionaires like Barry Seidel, who's poured $1.6 billion into Leonard Leo's coffers, and the connections between their interests and the interests of the religious right, which maybe we'll have a chance to get into later. But before we get to that, Andrew, Rachel's mentioned some of the things that are in the playbook, but that's not really all. Can you take us a little further into these issues, please?
Sure, and I think it has a lot to do with that shadow network. I mean, what Rachel's talking about is Project 2025 is imposing one narrow religious viewpoint on all of us through public policy using the machinery of the state. So Project 2025 is Christian nationalism. And a big part of that is the playbook, that 900-page, 4-pound playbook that you held up there, Nina. There it is, right? But again, that's the public-facing part. That's the sanitized part that they felt comfortable publishing for all the world to see. So that's the tip of the iceberg that peaks above the water, but there's so much more that lurks beneath the surface. And what lurks beneath is that shadow network, because the people and groups behind Project 2025, they want so much more. So you have groups like the Heritage Foundation, the Alliance Defending Freedom, First Liberty Institute, the Family Research Council, and so many more. These are the groups that AU is fighting against in court every day on religious freedom and church-state separation cases, right? So Project 2025 was spearheaded by Christian nationalists, and it reflects those dangerous beliefs. It seeks to take away Americans' freedom to live as themselves and believe as they choose, including, as Rachel said, by diverting public funds to private religious schools, by rolling back the rights of LGBTQ plus people, banning the most accessible form of abortion and limiting reproductive health care, erecting those roadblocks to racial justice. But again, that's what they published. There's so much more. There was an undercover video that rocketed around the internet a couple weeks ago. Russ Vought, who Rachel mentioned, is a self-professed Christian nationalist. He admits it. He is one of the authors and driving forces behind Project 2025. And in fact, in that video, he assures journalists that Project 2025 was going to, quote, rehabilitate Christian nationalism. But he also, in that video, talked about the second, even more secretive phase of Project 2025, which is the implementation of all of these policies that are in that huge handbook. Vought talked about phase 2, which includes drafting, all of the hundreds of executive orders, the regulations, and all of those that would implement the policies that are in that handbook. So again, you have the playbook, but then there's all of the extra stuff that goes into it, including the ultimate goals of the people and the groups who are behind Project 2025 and what they have been working towards for years. And some of the goals are far more extreme than what's in the playbook itself. And I think too, it's worth pointing out that Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation are taking advantage of this dichotomy. And I'm going to use no-fault divorce as an example here, because you can't find that in the handbook. And Project 2025 and its proponents, they're using the absence of that to claim that there's all this disinformation being spread about Project 2025. But Media Matters looked at the groups behind it and they said, look, there's at least 22 Project 2025 advisory board members that have attacked or called for an end to no-fault divorce, right? And that is a really useful data point for us when we are trying to translate the language of that handbook that Rachel mentioned about protecting the, quote, biblically based definition of marriage and family. What does that mean? What is biblically based definition of marriage and family? Look at what they're saying elsewhere. And it also kind of, I think, it's a useful data point when we're thinking about what this country might look like when phase 2 is implemented. And one of the things Americans United has been doing is we've been working with the Project 2025 task force that was formed by Representative Jared Huffman and other members of Congress. And just yesterday, they actually started a tip line, which essentially allows whistleblowers to submit more about phase 2 of Project 2025. Anyway, I think that's just to point out that one of the big things that is really lost in any discussion of Project 2025 is that it is so much more than just this playbook. It really is just so much more. And the other thing that's missing is the human cost of the human toll of Project 2025. And that is another thing that we've been working to change at Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And so we really wanted to show our viewers here today this video that we put together to kind of put a human face on the cost of Project 2025, if we can roll that video.
I can't imagine a better life for us than as parents. I wanted to be able to have at least one biological child. Then we realized that a biological child wasn't an option for us. Then we decided to do the foster to adopt.
We started lining everything up.
So we found a child, a little boy in Florida. This one stood out to us. Unfortunately, as a Christian organization, our executive team made the decision several years ago to only provide adoption services to prospective adoptive families that share our belief system.
Liz just called me crying. Because we were Jewish, we weren't able to be parents. It was a gut punch. Our taxpayer dollars are going to foster care, yet we can't adopt a child through that system.
You know, it's hard sometimes seeing any of your friends that have kids. You're happy for that person, but you also long for that.
Project 2025 is this voluminous 900-page document that the Christian nationalist movement has come up with on how they're going to take over the United States, basically.
To know that Project 2025 recognizes what's happening and is supporting it, it's really hard to swallow.
It's really disheartening to see that there's entire political arms at this point hell-bent on trying to make us second-class citizens.
We know this is an injustice.
If Project 2025 can come for us, it can come for anyone. Americans United for Separation of Church and State. That kind of sounds like what we're trying to do right here.
They've been along with us for all the struggles and the ups and downs. They handle all the really complicated things that I don't always understand. We tell our story and they take care of it from there.
They're dedicated to the cause of not letting a theocracy be established.
Americans United has been a light for us in this difficult time.
We're still nervous, but at least we know we're not alone.
So Nina, should I tell them a little bit about Liz and Gabe, who are featured in the video?
Yes, please tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah. So Liz and Gabe Rutenram are our clients in a case that is still active in Tennessee. No one should be discriminated against because they don't pass a religious test to be parents. in this country when it comes to a taxpayer-funded foster care agency, which is what we're talking about here. And by the way, as Gabe said, if it can happen to us, it can happen to anyone, and I'm going to talk to that in a minute. But you may have seen in the video that there was like some text that we highlighted and showed, and that was actually the text of Project 2025, which
Right.
called out explicitly lawsuits like the Liz and Gabe Rutenram one to say, we will fight those, right? So they are instituting a policy in the country that embeds religious privilege and favoritism into our law, turning what is religious freedom, right? What we used to all think of as religious freedom that applies to all of us into religious privilege for a select few. And so we brought this lawsuit on behalf of Liz and Gabe under the Tennessee state constitution's church-state separation protections. All the state constitutions have such protections. We were intentionally avoiding this case going to the Supreme Court. That's why we brought it in state court, right? Because, you know, we felt like we actually have more of a chance there, and the case is still alive. Just to tell you a little bit more about Liz and Gabe, they're incredible people. They're in their low 30s, the most giving people that you can imagine. They've already fostered hundreds of foster care children, including teenagers in need of loving homes. And they had their heart set on a special needs little boy in Florida. And that's when they went to get their certification from the one foster care agency in their area that would give them that type of out-of-state foster to adopt certification. And they were turned away because they're Jewish. But it's not just happening to them. I'm returning to that point of Gabe's. Another one of our clients was a white Catholic woman in South Carolina who went through the rigorous process to foster children herself. She had hundreds of foster children. Her dad had been a foster child, so they had taken in a lot of kids into their family. She was ready to do the same, and she went through the process. They said, you would be the perfect parent. Just one more question. What is the name of your church? She told them the name of her Catholic parish, and they turned her away. Why? And they're taxpayer funded with her tax dollars because they only work with evangelical Protestants. Fortunately for us, and by pure serendipity, her name was Amy Madonna. So that lawsuit was called Madonna versus HHS. We felt like we were on God's side. And then the third case that I'll tell you about of Americans United, and the reason I'm telling you about these different cases is because it really connects the dots between the different communities who become affected when we undermine church-state separation. This case was on behalf of Fatma Maroof and Bryn Esplin, a lesbian couple in Texas who wanted to provide refuge for refugee kids, okay, through a federally funded program. They were turned away because they didn't, quote, mirror the Holy Family, right? So again, we're seeing the human toll, right? First and foremost, and I'll say this as a mother, in terms of the children in need of loving homes, where parents are perfectly qualified and pass all those tests. But also, back to my original point, no parents should be discriminated against in this country by the government because they don't pass a religious litmus test. So I'll pause there because I want to turn it back to you, Nina.
Thanks. It was such a powerful video, but your examples are heartbreaking, but also bring to the fore the issue of this 900-page document. One of the most commonly used words in it is family. As you probably know, the foreword by Kevin Roberts explains, we're putting the family unit. The family unit is the base, the foundation of our nation. And it purports to be pro-family. And yet they're going after these people who are trying to be families on this issue of religious, quote, religious freedom. And I want to ask you guys, you're both lawyers. I am, a longtime observer of this this growing movement, and the use of the term religious freedom as a slogan, but also as a as a legal concept. They always will revert to, we Christians are under attack. We're in the lion's den. We're in this secular society, but we're under attack, and you're attacking our religious freedom. And I just want to know, how do you suggest people talk about this amongst themselves with people who may be religious, but who are not quite as who are maybe susceptible to that kind of infectious paranoia that is really part of their propaganda? And also, as lawyers, how they legalized this concept. I know that could be a long answer, but if you could just sort of.
There is so much to say. There's so much to say in response to this that we will both speak about separate things. So Andrew, since I just spoke, do you want to start, and then I will embellish?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a whole book about that question, Yeah. That's why I wrote American Crusade. We have seen over the last 10, 20 years, this weaponizing of religious freedom as a legal concept. It has really been distorted and perverted. And what you're seeing with Project 2025 is an attempt to codify that in every federal agency, basically across the federal government, not just through the courts, which is the main mechanism that Christian nationalists have been using lately to weaponize that concept of religious freedom is through court cases. After, with the help of Leonard Leo, they effectively captured the Supreme Court. And I mean, one of the things that is, I think, really worth focusing and drilling down on to your question specifically about how do we have these conversations, it is about setting lines. And one of the lines is this basic do no harm principle that we talk about all the time at Americans United. And I break this down in American Crusade into actually 3 different lines. And the first is we distinguish between action and belief. Your right to believe is absolute. Your right to act on that belief is not. So I actually opened the book with several stories about drivers letting Jesus take the wheel, like actually admitting that that is what they want to do. And now they're free to believe that. But if they act on that belief, the civil law can step in and say, no, you don't get to do that. It can fine them. It can take away their license, maybe even send them to prison, because belief is unlimited, but action is limited. And then, so the question then becomes, okay, well, if religious freedom is not an unlimited right, if it really is limited in some fashion, when is it permissible for the government to step in? And the answer there is also pretty simple. It's where the rights of other people begin, right? Your right to exercise your religion ends where the rights of other people begin. So that the eagle-eyed among the viewers today will have seen that the tagline at the end of that video said that religious freedom is not a license to discriminate. That's what we're talking about. Religion and religious freedom are not a license to harm others or infringe their rights in any way. And that is what we are seeing change. That is the biggest shift that we are seeing change over the last decade or two in the laws, that religious freedom is becoming an excuse, a legal justification to harm and infringe the rights of other people.
Thank you. Sorry, Rachel.
No, sorry. Can I add briefly?
Yes, I want to move on to Oklahoma because it's super important. So briefly.
Okay, I will just add one.
You guys are lawyers.
I will contain myself and add just one small thought to that of many, which is what we're seeing today is a group of people, a small, relatively small in this country group of people who are raging against the dying of their privilege, right? In 2014, we stopped being a majority white Christian country. In 2045, we'll stop being a majority white country, right? And so what's happening is, as other types of people in our society come closer to the equality that our Constitution promises all of us, a lot of these ultra-conservative white Christians are doing this jujitsu move, right? Of saying, well, you're hurting us. right? You're offending our religious freedom so that they have an excuse to punch back, right? And to say, like, you punched first, right? You're hurting us. So we get to punch back against you. Another way of putting it is, and I love this one, when you're accustomed to having power and privilege, requests for equality from others can feel like oppression, and gains towards equality feel like we're being oppressed. Whereas really what we're doing is evening the playing fields in this country, and we're not there, but we're getting closer to it. And that's what America is actually about: freedom for all, not just for some.
I just want to, on the freedom, on the religious freedom issue, the one thing that we haven't gotten to here, and I just want to briefly touch on it, is the way that the legal framework of religious freedom worked in the Hobby Lobby case, which I'm pretty sure most of our listeners know about. The Hobby Lobby case against allowing people not to, pharmacists not to cover, or sorry, employers not to cover contraception under the ACA. Essentially, somebody told me this recently, and I'll ask you, Andrew, and then we can move to Oklahoma. Essentially placed belief or superstition above scientific fact, legally set the framework for people coming into court and saying, well, I believe this, therefore it supersedes science. And I wonder if, the implications of that are going to, under all of the pieces of this document here, all the agencies, the CDC, the HHS, the implementation of this kind of religious freedom notion throughout the government, how that might affect things like public health.
Well, I mean, I think certainly, and I think you saw the effect on public health as we tried to survive a pandemic. I have a chapter on the Hobby Lobby case in American Crusade, and specifically, I think what you're talking about, Nina, is the Green family, which theoretically owned Hobby Lobby, but actually had an interest in several trusts that also had an interest in another set of trusts, which in turn owned the corporation. So if you can unravel that, it's a nightmare. How their religious beliefs make it through all those layers of legal fiction evades me, but they believed that these drugs caused abortions. They were abortifacients. You had a whole host of medical professionals and scientists telling the Supreme Court, no, that's not what happens. These drugs are not abortifacients. And Sam Alito, in his opinion, says, oh, well, they believe they are, so that's all that matters. And that is the central, I think that's the question that you're getting at. That is one of at least 5 glaring errors in that opinion that really helped start turning religious freedom on its head.
And do we have any recourse? Do you see? I just want to show everybody I got my vaccinations today because I believe in science.
I got mine last week.
Oh, good. And I have no side effects. I'm still walking around and I'm not magnetizing anything. So we got to Hobby Lobby. That's a good entryway into Oklahoma and what's going on there, because they are Oklahoma. Are they Oklahoma City or Tulsa? I can't remember. But anyway, Hobby Lobby is based in the state of Oklahoma. And Andrew has done terrific work looking at the state's education system as a kind of petri dish for what they're going to do with education nationally if they can get away with it, completely breaking down the wall between church and state for our children. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on down there?
Absolutely. And this really stemmed from a lot of the work that we at Americans United for Separation of Church and State have been doing on the ground in Oklahoma, which, Rachel, I'm going to kick to you to talk about in a sec, but like it is doing that work has really just kind of opened our eyes. We've had a lot of engagement. We've built these relationships with people on the ground, like Representative Mickey Dolenz, who is in the legislature, Reverend Shannon Fleck, who's been fighting Christian nationalism in various congregations around the state, and Sam Perry, who is an Oklahoman and a leading scholar of Christian nationalism and a friend. And when I was talking with Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck, who is also the executive director of the Oklahoma Faith Network, she told me that Project 2025 is not some far off possibility for Oklahomans. It has been our reality for some time now. and specifically talking about in the education context, where Oklahoma ranks last or among the dead last across the board when it comes to education. And this is Project 2025. So if you read the handbook, it's planned for public education. Again, it includes, quote, sunsetting the U.S. Department of Education altogether, right? We're going to shutter that. And then, like abortion, returning control to the states. And they express this in the playbook as the, quote, like bright future, I think is the phrase they use, for when states are in full control of education. And in Oklahoma, you have this, I'll use the word character, Ryan Walters, who is the state superintendent. And again, Rachel's going to get into the specifics, but Ryan Walters has a very intimate relationship with the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage president, Kevin Roberts, hosted Walters on his podcast, and Walters just gushes over Roberts, talking about how the Heritage Foundation has been an incredible partner to help us develop the plans for our state, our schools, and our education system. But it's not just that. Walters also tapped the coffers of Oklahoma to pay a Washington, D.C. based media firm $5,000 a month to manage his Christian nationalist macho image, to write his op-eds, to write his speeches, to book him for media appearances. And so the group, the media company, is Vaught Strategies. This is the group that's getting fat off the Oklahoma taxpayers, and it's run by Mary Vaught, who is the vice president of communications for the Heritage Foundation. She is married to Russell Vaught, who is the man that we've already spoken about, who's in charge of phase 2 of Project 2025, the guy who wants to rehabilitate Christian nationalism. And there are a ton more connections on both personnel and policy, including outsourcing really important education work to the groups that are behind Project 2025, but y'all can find the details and citations in the article. But I got to pass to Rachel to talk about some of the other specifics that are happening.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma is just a petri dish of white Christian nationalism already in play. And it does, as Andrew was saying, demonstrate how Project 2025 is already a reality in certain parts of this country. So in Oklahoma, and everyone should know about this, I'm sure the Oklahomans do, I don't know if everyone in the country does, they have actually ushered through a process, the nation's first religious public school. It's actually a religious public charter school. Charter schools are defined as public schools in the law of Oklahoma, and it would be St. Isidore of Seville, a Catholic school run by the Archdiocese and Diocese of Oklahoma City and Tulsa, that would discriminate against families that don't abide by not just their religious beliefs, but their sexual moral codes, etc. Absolutely would indoctrinate and discriminate. And here's the difference between St. Isidore and private school vouchers. Private school vouchers, which are still terrible, funnel public money, all of our money, through parents and then to these private, primarily religious, primarily Christian schools. This would be direct and full funding to a religious school, calling it a public school. It would be a sea change for our democracy. And it's so radical that, and thankfully, this overreach is engendering a backlash, including from Republicans, because church-state separation should be as American as the flag, right? And it should be a bipartisan issue. And so the Republican Attorney General in Oklahoma sued, as did Americans United, and his lawsuit won so far before the state Supreme Court. I think I saw in the chat, I think Fred, thank you for keeping everyone knowledgeable. They have filed for an extension to file a cert petition before the Supreme Court. So, and it just takes 4 justices on the Supreme Court to accept a case. So this ultra-conservative Supreme Court might be hearing a case about whether our nation is going to allow religious public schools. And I'll just say, this is just one example of what's going on in Oklahoma. Superintendent Ryan Walters, who Andrew just told you about, has also issued a mandate for schools to teach, and this is his quote from his video, from the Bible. Public school classrooms to teach from the Bible, to have Bibles in the classrooms, and to teach about the Bible as core American values. And I want to distinguish Christian nationalism from what is completely fine. Prayer in school, right? The saying goes, there's been prayer in public schools since there's been math tests. And that's fine. Children pray in public schools every day. It's when the government endorses and forces children to read and venerate, right, and to practice a certain religion that we have a big religious freedom problem. And by the way, I'll just conclude by saying Superintendent Ryan Walters of Oklahoma must have been green with envy when he saw what Louisiana did, which was the first state in our nation to actually pass a law requiring all public schools to post the 10 Commandments, one conservative Protestant version of the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom in the state. So this is a very big problem. It's exhibiting itself in public education. Nina, it's exhibiting itself in abortion bans, which impose one narrow religious viewpoint on all of us, in the attacks on LGBTQ people, on the book bans that we're seeing across the nation, but it could get much worse.
I just want to follow up quickly before we get to the what can we do part of this, which is very important. Two things. You mentioned the Vaught family, the Vaught couple. One of the fascinating things about this movement,
5GW
the Project
and they know
2025
about
movement, and as
Vaught,
Rachel
Russell
pointed
Vaught,
out, this is a very small
we could find some
cabal,
info on
a very
Twitter on
small
that
group
one.
of people with a lot of power, is the number of couples that are involved. It's crazy. So when you're reading this, say the HHS section, Health and Human Services, written by Severino. Mr. Severino is married to, forget her first name, Carrie Severino, who's Leonard Leo's number 2 and has been for 25 years. And then, of course, you have the example of Ginny and Clarence, also Catholic converts, hardcore religious right, who are, they're not just working together, they're literally grifting together. I mean, what you're saying here is that, they're passing sort of jobs to each other, sharing the work of this movement and actually making money on it. So that's the first thing. And I want to make sure that we get to the issue of what can we do about all of this? It feels to me, again, as I've covered this for 20 years, this movement, which at first was just, you just kind of thought, well, they're people down south who go to, fairgrounds where dinosaurs existed with humans and Bible school and where it was sort of off to the side, and then just the way that it is now infused into our schools and our public policy, it feels inexorable. It feels like there's something has just the wall between church and state that we always, the words, the wall between church and state, are actually under attack. The concept is under attack. Mm-hmm. And they're going to take it up, as you said, they're going to take these things up to the court that's going to crack that wall. What, other than having lawyers like you take these cases and go into the system and try to do battle, what can people do in the event that this is coming to the town that you live in?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Rachel, I'll take the Project 2025 if you want to take the broader piece of that. So, I mean, I think the number one thing people can do about Project 2025 is talk about it everywhere, in person, on social media, especially on your group chats and your family emails and your family texts. When we started talking about Project 2025 at Americans United last fall, nobody had really heard of it. And the first polling that we really saw that was reliable, which was done after it started breaking through, showed that in late June, 76% of Americans knew little or nothing about Project 2025. But we also had data showing that the more people learned, the more they found it to be awful, the more they viewed it unfavorably. And just yesterday, we were sharing new data around the office that comes from an NBC poll, which has Project 2025 polling 4% favorable, 57% unfavorable, which is just a shockingly huge differential. Ask your polling nerd friends about how big a deal that is. It's great. It's a huge improvement. And I, of course, would love to take full credit for us at Americans United and our toolkit, which I'll talk about in a second. But the reality is that 39% of the people in that study were still neutral or didn't know about Project 2025. So that's where our toolkit comes in. It's unfavorable, but how do you talk about this behemoth without sounding like a conspiracy theorist? And so Americans United has got you covered. Go to au.org/project2025. There is a link to a toolkit at the top of that page. So au.org/project2025 and click on the toolkit link. And it has everything you need to have a conversation about this. If you're going to a rally, we've got signs you can print. If you're going to a town hall, we've got questions you can ask candidates. We've got texts and emails that you can share about this threat with your various circles. We've got graphics for social media, and there's some really cool infographics on there too. We've got videos that you can share. We've also got a guide that we've developed over several months about how to have conversations about this in person with the people that you care about, because even just successfully warning one or two people about this can start a domino effect. And we are also adding to that toolkit all the time. So if you have something you'd want to see there, just let us know more and we'll work on it. But right now I'm going to pass it to Rachel.
Yeah. Great answer. I would definitely recommend the Project 2025 toolkit. I think it breaks it down. But, you know, we're living in a moment of a lot of despair for a lot of us still. And we're coming out of the pandemic, coming out of a lot of rough years still, and seeing what we're witnessing across the country. I want to come back to the good news. There is a cure, and it's called church-state separation. It really does work, and it's the hook in all of our lawsuits that we're bringing. It stops the government from favoring one narrow set of religious views over any others or over non-religion, right? So that's the great news. The other great news about church-state separation is it doesn't just enable us to believe as we choose. It clears the path for us to be able to live as ourselves and not have to pass a religious test, to live as a queer person, to be able to seek reproductive health care if we want it, right? To be able to read and learn from the books that we want our children to read and learn, right? And so that's the beauty of it. The other beauty of it is it's a uniter. So I think another part of the despair of today, and the despair is coming from a lot of places, is that we're more divided as a nation that many of us have ever lived through. I was speaking last week in a mosque and in a synagogue on separate days of the week about church-state separation. And the week before that in a church, and then the month before that in another church. One was a predominantly white church, one was a predominantly Black church. And then I spoke in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community center in New York City. What I'm trying to say is this issue of nationally recommitting ourselves to church-state separation is a uniter. It connects the dots across so many issues that so many of us care about. So one thing that you can do is talk about and advocate for church-state separation and connect it. There's so many on-ramps for this issue, everyone. I was speaking to who was pretty close to a white Christian nationalist sitting next to me on the plane to Buffalo, and she started using some words that made me realize, I think she's pretty far against church-state separation. But, and she was very religious Christian. And you know what I told her? That a Baptist pastor long ago called Roger Williams, who founded the Religious Freedom Colony of Rhode Island, said, forced worship stinks in God's nostrils, right? So religious people hate not separating church and state if they're authentic about their beliefs. Atheists hate when church-state separation is undermined. Jews, Muslims, Hindus, it actually unites all of us, and we need to advocate for it and appreciate, as Nina and I and Andrew have all said, that we actually have the power of the people. We are fighting a real minority who are clinging to their power. But if we believe in the power of our collective voices, bridge divides, we will recommit this nation to the protector of all of us, church-state separation. And join au.org. We'll help plug you in.
Thank you. Thank you both. I want to give our listeners a chance to ask questions. I'm looking at some in the chat, quite a few actually,
Did
really
something
good
happen to
ones.
the?
I don't know if I'll be able to
I
get
can't
to
get in.
all of them.
Oh,
The first one came in early. And I'd like to just ask, the question is, was anything in Project 2025 a surprise, or was it just what they think they're comfortable talking about?
there's their
And
toolkit,
I'd like
take
to,
action
I
page.
mean, I went into Heritage and interviewed some of these people about it and asked the question because I thought some of the things in it are so outrageous that they were just in there to quote own the libs. And I asked them that. I said, is this, there's things in here that they're just so shocking that, and are you serious? And they said, well, we wouldn't have put them in there if we didn't think we were going to put our heft behind it. So I think they are serious. And I think one of the problems is that pollsters are finding they're trying to poll on this Project 2025 issue and how, as Andrew said, how much of it has penetrated the attention of people. And what they're finding is that even among them, well, even among MAGAs, who they're, when they ask them about the things that are in Project 2025, they say, oh, it's just a think tank.
I'll put it
It's
in the
not going to
description,
happen.
too.
Or, Trump, if you say Trump is going to do these things, they'll say, well, he just talks like that. They don't take it seriously. So the public is not taking seriously
I'll do that.
what you guys as lawyers recognize as serious assaults that are about to, that they have laid the groundwork for in the US court system. So I've answered that question. I think if they are serious about it. Let's see here. I guess, do laws that require Bible teaching declare how the Bible is taught, i.e., is Bible criticism permissible in these schools? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I can go ahead and go for. I mean, I assume this is getting towards what Rachel was talking about with Ryan Walters. I mean, the general
sent it,
rule
gal.
is you can teach about the Bible, but you can't preach the Bible as literal truth. You can educate about the Bible, but you can't indoctrinate students into a particular religious belief. And we have seen historically that while it is theoretically permissible to teach, again, about the Bible, it often goes off the rails. There have been some really good studies. Mark Chansey of SMU has done some studies on this that show that it tends to kind of end up infringing on the rights of the students who are in those classrooms. But what we have happening in Oklahoma is something that is totally different, which seems to be a deliberate attempt to use the machinery of the state to impose the Bible on other people's children. And I think Rachel hinted at this too, but people should just stay tuned for more about that.
I have a good question here about the legal framework here. What authority do you guys have in your lawsuits to demonstrate that white Christian nationalism violates the theory of the originals? Because we do hear them now talking about they have this idea. I've seen them talking about the idea that that there's nothing explicit in the First Amendment that says there is a wall between church and state. And I think there are some cases that are already coming up that are going after that
or
concept. So what authority are you relying on to protect it? You're laughing.
I'll start. We're relying on the Constitution. We're relying on the fact that church-state separation is baked into the Constitution. The words religious freedom also don't exist in, for example, the First Amendment. God is not mentioned in the Constitution. The Constitution protects religious freedom in Article 6, which prohibits a religious test for public office, and through the two religion clauses in the First Amendment that work together to protect religious freedom for all, right? The free exercise clause and the non-establishment clause, right? Putting a limit on free exercise so that we all can freely exercise our religion. And I think that's what we cite. Thomas Jefferson first spoke about the wall of separation in his letter to the Danbury Baptists in 1802. That was how our founding fathers, who, by the way, got a lot wrong, but got church-state separation right, that was how they expounded and offered commentary in those days on the law. And the Supreme Court, starting in the 1800s, and then, a dozen times, has cited the First Amendment as protecting church-state separation. So we have a great article. If you Google, is church-state separation in the Constitution, you'll find Americans United short, pithy article answering that question.
Yeah, and I would just add, people should bookmark that article and use it, because I mean, it's honestly like one of the weakest arguments against the concept. Like, there are several amendments that reference that we have summed up as you get a fair trial in this country. And shorthanding a right doesn't mean that the right does not exist. And then Rachel and I are laughing and smiling because this is something we were actually just talking about it earlier today. I just will add one thing. The wall of separation between church and state is an American original, right? That it is an American invention. The idea was floating around in the Enlightenment, but it was never implemented until the American experiment. I mean, before that, no other nation in the history of the world had sought to protect the ability of its citizens to think freely by separating religion and government. And I believe that is something that we can and should be proud of. And we certainly should not let people undermine it with myths about, being founded as a Christian nation. And if I continue on, I will stay on my soapbox for too long. So I will step down now. Thank you.
There is a question here that comes up frequently in our dinner conversations about what might happen depending on who gets elected. What are the chances that Harris could or will expand the Supreme Court, and how important is that to our future legal, the strength of our legal system and of these concepts like separating church and state?
So I talk about this in American Crusade quite a bit. And, I think one of the truths that we have to grapple with right now is that the conservative justices on the Supreme Court are not impartial jurists that are working to carefully determine the meaning of a constitutional provision without bias, right? I mean, we have to grapple with the fact that the court was packed, that there was a hostile takeover of the Supreme Court, and Leonard Leo is the guy who orchestrated that takeover. And one of the key quotes that I included in American Crusade that I think sums up a lot of what we are facing as a country right now is, as a former employee of Leo's described his mission like this, quote, "He figured out 20 years ago that conservatives had lost the culture war. Abortion, gay rights, contraception. Conservatives didn't have a chance if public opinion prevailed. So they needed to stack the courts." And so that is the mission that they went about doing. And it's really important to pay attention to the anti-democratic admission and goal inherent in that quote, right? If they don't stack the court, the majority is going to rule. If they don't stack the court, democracy is going to work. It goes back to our why. It goes back to why this is all happening. There's this rising equality and the waning supremacy of this Christian nationalist class. And we know that Leo's groups spent something like $540 million that we know of packing the court from 2014 to 2020. And, this is something I point out in the book. You don't spend that kind of money to get an impartial court. They bought a court. And you can see this in the data too. This ploy to capture the court's work. There were a couple studies that crunched the numbers, and these actually don't cover some of the biggest wins from the two, now three most recent terms. So the numbers are actually more dramatic. But before the courts were packed, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of religion about half the time. Under Roberts, the study found that win rate jumps to 81%. And this is not a pro-religion shift. This is a pro-Christian shift. So in early courts, mainstream Christianity was favored in 44% of its cases, but under Roberts, that doubles to 85%. So in what I say in American Crusade, American Crusade works to put a face on those numbers. And then what I say is that this proves that the new guiding principle of this Supreme Court is not the Constitution or the law, but that Christian nationalism wins.
Good question. How will Trump implement Project 2025? What would he do in the first 100 days? You touched on that when you brought up Vought earlier and this sort of shadow plan. I think that there's a lawsuit. I just saw a headline flash by today. There's somebody who's actually starting to sue them to get them to explain what this 100-day plan is. Do you have any idea what the plan is? It is
79
all
days,
executive orders.
gal.
Or sending National Guardsmen into the cities. I mean, what does the first 100 days plan look like? And do you have any idea how that's going to come to how we can extract that information in advance and get the public
He says he's
alarmed
going to
enough
do things
about it?
when he's president-elect.
That's the part that they're being more secretive about. I mean, there's a lot we don't know. I mean, that's why you have members of Congress opening this hotline to collect information about it. Rachel, I see you wanting to.
No, I mean, Project 2025 has 4 parts, right? And one of them is a personnel database. Another one of them are training modules to spread their gospel. Another one is a policy agenda, and the other is an agenda for the first 180 days. So I think, you can find a lot there. But I think the bigger point that I'd like to make is Project 2025 is bigger than a Trump presidency, right? It's like, it's come out now, right? Right now there's a Democratic presidency, but in Missouri, they passed an abortion ban embedding the religious language into the law. Like, the overreach is shocking, in this moment. And, it used to be that JFK, when he ran for president, had to give his bona fides about church-state separation as a Catholic running for president. We're operating in a whole different realm, right? The Christian nationalist movement flag, right, of the new apostolic Reformation movement, the Appeal to Heaven flag, the white flag with the green pine tree, Appeal to Heaven, is flying outside of Speaker Mike Johnson's office in the U.S. Capitol and Justice Alito's vacation home, or at least flew, right? So, and federal legislators are calling themselves proud Christian nationalists. State legislators, like the ones in Missouri, are literally saying, as a Catholic, I do believe X, when they're passing their abortion bans. So we've got a much bigger problem than a Trump presidency. Trump in his presidency undermined church-state separation dramatically, and we all know was in a transactional relationship with the Christian nationalist movement, right? But I hope we all realize that no matter who wins for president, we better nationally recommit to church-state separation before it's too late.
We have a minute or two left. How might we recommit?
How might we recommit?
Gal.
Well, I mean, Andrew, I can start, but I mean, I spoke to some of this before. One thing is church-state separation has been more of a cerebral, inaccessible, not really in the common vernacular type of language, at least I'm Gen X, at least for my generation, right? Things like abortion rights were protected by the penumbra of privacy, which is
Gal's
gone
dropped all the
now
X
because of
accounts
white
you need
Christian
to know.
nationalism.
Make sure
but it's
you
actually
follow.
time to start talking about it again before it goes away. And I think the way to talk about it is to connect the dots between church-state separation
Let's
and
unify over
reproductive
ending
freedom
money
and
in politics.
LGBTQ equality and public education and the right to read and learn, right? And making sure that accurate science
Did
and
you see our
accurate
Opus Dei
sex education, which is age
show?
appropriate, is taught to our children. I mean, there's so many. If you believe in any of these things, you believe in church-state separation. You just might not have articulated that yet, but it's time to articulate it. That's thing number 1. Speak up and connect the dots. Thing number 2 is bridge divides. Go find someone from a different community from you and say, hey, we might not agree on the war in the Middle East or whatever it is, right? But we can agree on this. It protects all of us, right? So bridge divides. Thing number 3 is just keep hope alive. Again, the despair is tangible. I've seen it in the chat of this conversation even, and it's very real. And I like to quote Howard Zinn, who wrote The People's History, who says, to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. And if we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. But if we remember those times and places, and there are so many where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act. And bottle that up, folks.
I love Howard
and get
Zinn.
busy.
That's a great
because
book.
we have the power of the people. And
Thank-
join au.org.
Thank you. Yes, I
Fascinating.
just want to close. Excellent ending statement there, Rachel. I really appreciate both of you coming on, and everyone, please go over to AU, look at their material, and go forth and multiply and keep the faith.
Thank you, everyone. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Okay. Wow. That was fan-fucking-tastic. That was really good. Let's make the kitty cam bigger, huh? Hold on. Don't leave me. There we go. There's kitty cam. Wow, that was so interesting. God, Gal, thanks for bringing that forward yesterday so that we didn't miss it. That was really very interesting. And now I really want to. I actually just got an audiobook version of Andrew Seidel's new book. Now I forget what it was because I have no brain left. Oh, I'm brainless, and it's true. E-I-E-I-O. Let me see. All right, hold on. It's not the one he talked about because that was the last one, but it's this. What is it called? Yeah, bam, bam, bam. Oh, Jiminy Crickets. Hold on, don't leave me. Digital. Oh, it's not even showing it to me. God damn it. I don't even know. Okay. I know what it is. Anyway, the point is, yeah, careful, don't stream it, right? I know. It definitely gave me a lot more places to look for information, and just looking at au.org, there's a ton of information on their website about how to actually get involved and make phone calls and on particular issues. One of the things that it inspired in me, and I tweeted about it before I read their to-do page or their tools, was that what if we put out for people like, here's who you call, here's what you can ask, just to find out what's going on in your state. Like, I feel like sometimes, like with some of the education bills, maybe the abortion bills might get more publicity, but perhaps there are things happening in people's states that they aren't even aware of, right? And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see if you could put together a very easy matrix, of if you call the Secretary of State, you should ask beep bop boop, or whatever. And just to find out, what is the status of access to abortion in my state? What is the status of dollars going to private education through vouchers in our state? And if you don't know it, I'm not saying, waste your time. But I just think that would be interesting because I do believe that when people are aware of what is happening, at least it starts to grow, and it takes time, but you have to start somewhere. So I really think that would be a really interesting idea. So, all right, well, I'm going to go, and thank you so much for coming. And I thought it was a great day of very good information, and the cat did a great job. He'll get an extra piece of salmon tonight. No. Or salmon flavored treat. And have a really wonderful evening. And I will see you tomorrow morning, same time as this morning, 6:30. So I will see you later. I'm so glad you were here too, Tom. And I'm so glad to see everyone. So thank you so much. All right. I'll talk. Yeah, Gus. All right. Love you too. All right, babies. Oh, have a great